I'd like to move on to the next item on the agenda, review and adopt agenda. Martha?
Madam Chair, members of the Resource and Development Subcommittee, proposed agenda of the federally designated housing entity study subcommittee of the Resources and Development Committee of the 22nd Nomination Council, November 21st, 2011, presiding Catherine Manali, RDC chairperson. Location, Winter Rock, Arizona. Item 1, call meeting to order. Local communication announcements. 2, recognize guests and visiting officials. 3, review and adopt agenda. 4, review and adopt journal. 5, receive and report. A, overview of the Resources and Development Committee Resolution RDCJY-18-11. B, report by the Navajo Housing Authority on the history as the tribally designated entity. C, report by the Division Community Development on the history of being recognized as the housing department within the Navajo Nation government. Executive branch. D, report by the Department of Veterans Affairs on the history as a recipient of the Navajo funding. So business and new business. A, develop a plan of action to complete the assigned tasks of the federally designated housing entity study subcommittee. 8, close the session under announcements and adjournment. Madam Chair.
Committee members, motion? Motion. Ms. Roberts, second. Mr. John? Sorry, you didn't have to skip hanging out here. Questions or comments? If none, all in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 members from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favor, 0 opposed. With that, we have adopted the agenda, and we're going on to review or receiving reports. Item 5. Item 4, review and adopt journal. This is our first meeting, so we will not have a journal yet. Item 5, receive reports. A, review of the Resources and Development Committee Resolution RDCJ-18-18. Okay. Staff?
Madam Chair and members of the subcommittee, resolution RDCJY-18-11 is a resolution of the Resources and Development Committee of the 22nd Nomination Council that established the subcommittee, and it reads an action related to the Resources and Development establishing the tribally designated housing entity studies subcommittee of the Resources and Development Committee, selecting members and assigning tasks. Be it enacted 1 pursuant to 2 NNC Section 186, the Navajo Nation hereby establishes the tribally designated housing entity study subcommittee of the Resources and Development Committee comprised of the following 2 members: 1, Leonard Sosi; 2, Catherine Manali. 2, the tribally designated housing entity study subcommittee is hereby assigned the following task. A, to study the realization of the purposes of the Native American Housing and Assistance and Self-Determination Act of 1996, NAHASDA, on the Navajo Nation, including the placement of the primary responsibility for Indian housing activities with Navajo Nation, the enhancement of local accountability, the reflection of the local priorities of the Navajo Nation community, and the reduction of federal oversight and bureaucracy. E, to study the designated Navajo Nation lead agencies, NAHASDA funded activities as the nation's recipient of the NAHASDA funds, its activities in the preparation of the Navajo Nation Housing Plan, and its activities in monitoring NAHASDA funded activities on the Navajo Nation. C, to study if the nation's designated lead agency has obligated NAHASDA funds within the 2 years of NAHASDA grant award pursuant to 24 CFR Part 1000.523. D, to study with the assistance of the Navajo housing providers of the Navajo Nation should continue Navajo Housing Authority as its TDHE to best meet the interests of the Navajo Nation under NAHASDA. 3, the tribally designated housing entity study subcommittee is hereby directed to work with 2 designated appointees of the Navajo Housing Authority Board of Commissioners and the 2 designated appointees of the Navajo Nation President. 4, the tribally designated housing entity study subcommittee shall operate and abide by the same provisions that apply to standing committee meetings as set forth in 2 NNC Section 186. 5, the tribally designated housing entity subcommittee shall submit quarterly reports and a final recommendation to the Resources and Development Committee pursuant to NNC Section 186. The tribally designated housing entities that a subcommittee shall, in parentheses, exist until its assigned tasks are completed and report and recommendations is made to the Resources and Development Committee, end quote, on the Navajo Nation's tribally designated housing entity, and it's certified on the 26th day of July 2011 by Roscoe Smith, Vice Chairperson of the Resources and Development Committee. Madam Chair.
There you have it. The purpose of our existence is very well spelled out. So, hold on. Let me motion for acceptance of this report first. Motion, Delegate Sosi. Second, Travis John. Okay, Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the first item on the agenda, the report, the designation, I guess for the record, from the Navajo Nation Executive Branch, it'll be myself and also Mr. Travis John. Though when it gets to our presentation, we have some handouts here. From the executive branch. Back to why we're here. When was it? Maybe about a year ago. There was a sort of a plan. So I'll have Mr. Travis John also cover that later on. So although the legislation that we had a gap in between. Although I think we had another legislation in it. But the main purpose, the way I read this, is the TDHE, that word does it belong? A permanent home. I guess that's really our task. And the other one is the expenditure. I think Friday, good news came from DC that if you're not spending money, you're not going to get your FY12, and I think that has been cleared up from DC. But anyway, I think this committee still needs to the obligation, the expenditure of Nahazda money. So just to make sure that we're all on the same legislation, though, to study where does it really belong. So that was just a comment.
Yes, Delegate Sosi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to address the TDHE. This was in my campaign brochure, and I was re-elected based on that, one of the reasons. In my campaign brochure, I said we need to seriously reconsider the TDHE. And so, but I think, Madam Chair, when we proceed on this, we also have to look at other housing programs to see how TDHE will fit in. So I don't think we can address TDHE in isolation. Or other housing programs, because those are models. And when we look at that, we also have to see if they are working. And if they're not working well, then we cannot take TDHE into that same model. Because otherwise, TDHE will be doomed for failure. So if something is working right, then I think we need to seriously look at it, modeling TDHE after that. So that's how I look at it, that I think here, I don't want people to begin to think that the only thing we're here on is on TDHE. Because we're looking at the success of TDHE, and we have high lack of housing out there. And one of them is, how can we do the student housing that I think. And, we have this issue of the unspent monies. I don't think we should relax after that fortunate news. I think we need to be zealous about making sure that this issue doesn't come up again. And I think, it's real interesting too that we went to this meeting on the Native American Housing Council. That I take it that our staff are not too serious about housing. Many people attended that meeting and they ended up leaving. And at the end of the day, it was just me and Doug Benali were left with a few people. And we were talking about issues, legal and legislative issues. So that led me to believe that our staff are not serious about housing, but the Navajo people are. The Navajo people have a serious housing need. And I think if we have staff members that don't care about housing, they should tender their resignations. And we should only get people that are serious about it. Because we need some serious answers, and this is a big issue. And then we go along with veteran housing. I'd say over half of our veterans are probably homeless. And we hear all these promises, and I think it's time to tackle. How do we do it with TDHE? How do we do it in merging it with other programs, or in isolation if need be? And I think those are some of the things that I hope we get a good round of discussion on all these matters. Should I advance this case though before we get started and to see how we will address our work here? Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I'm going to plead with all the members, let's keep our minds open. Very and totally open. Because we're all going to sit at this table thinking, it's mine, I want to keep it, or I want to take it. We're going to have an open mind. We're going to decide where best to place this program. It was initially given to Navajo Housing Authority, I guess under pressure. It was given to the nation. The nation didn't conduct enough or adequate study in where it would go properly sit. So now we're going to take that time. We're going to have clear and open minds about it. And then as we learn about the programs and what are eligible projects, then I think at that time we can determine to do a housing plan, a proper housing plan. What egg onan wash control my authority Nelson. I hope we all left that at the door and check that at the door, and here we're going to do what is best for this program. It's got a lot of money in it. And we've got to get them spent. We've got to get those people's homes built. We've got to provide housing for our people. So with that, we're going to go on to item A or B on the agenda. Well, we've stated the purpose of our committee here. Mr. Mitchell and then Ms. Yazzie.
Okay, back to item 1, yeah.
Oh,
Item 1,
item A.
Item A.
Okay.
I think we still need some clarity to this committee. Voting,
Okay.
Who the official designee is, how do we vote. The setup of the subcommittee.
Okay.
The Office of Management and Budget as support staff to our designation model, the Controller's Office, basically what they see, model management and budget, they oversee contracts and all that. So do we allow for this subcommittee? Do we allow for it? And what's the
Okay.
What is our boundary as a committee? What is our boundary as a committee? Mr. Sosi, I'd say you guys will sit before us. I thought we were going to sit together and discuss it.
Yeah, we're gonna sit together. We're a committee here, right here. I'm gonna ask Martha, because right in the resolution it says that we will follow the subcommittee rules. I live a con there. Oh, okay. Second page, number 4. The tribally designated housing entity study subcommittee shall operate and abide by the same provisions that apply to standing committee meetings as set forth in 2 NC, subsection 186. Meaning only those that are formally accepted by your resolutions or letter of appointment, the way the president did for his executive branch. Only they can vote. There was no alternates brought forth, provisions for alternates. I'll call it NHHE. Ms. Yazzie? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Virginia. Okay, Madam Chair, I do appreciate. I did have our grants management representative who wasn't able to be here today, so I have Ms. Roberta Roberts in attendance, and if it's to be deemed official today moving forward, I would go ahead and ask Ms. Roberts to be entered into the record as the second representative on behalf of NHA. And further, I also would like to echo the sentiments expressed. I do take this initiative and this objective of the subcommittee very seriously, and being very open-minded, because obviously we're doing this on behalf of the Navajo people. And so I'm glad it's been brought to the forefront as I come on to NHA in 07. This has been a point of contention since then, ever since. So it would be good to look at some finality and some permanency as to how the tribe's designated housing entity, and when I hear that and see that, it is really a point of contact for all housing initiatives, I believe, whether it be for college housing, supportive housing. I think any mechanisms for housing should reside with the TDHE and not fragmented as it currently is situated within our government. So I appreciate the objective. I appreciate the formation of the subcommittee. We certainly will get our support in terms of having this open mind and having some permanency of determining the TDHE. Madam Chair, the other note I want to make as it pertains to the objectives outlined, as a matter of, just maybe this is a technical correction perhaps, in the resolution RDCJY-18-11, item number 2C, it reads, to study if the nation's designated lead agency has obligated NAHASDA funds within the 2 years of NAHASDA grant award pursuant to 24 CFR Part 1000.523. With the reauthorization of NAHASDA that took place in 2008, that provision has now been eliminated in the revised issuance of the revised regulations under NAHASDA. So with due respect, we can certainly provide that information, and I don't know how we need to treat that because that 2-year requirement is no longer applicable, Madam Chair.
But that the legislation would be on the internet for comments, and it's really important that all entities, programs, and everybody, look at those and provide us those information. In this case, I don't see that. We don't know everything. I always say that. I don't know everything. And that's why we have you experts in those areas. Guide us. Mr. Chavez John and then Delegate Susan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just for clarity, I guess one of the things is as a subcommittee here, in accordance with your standing committee subcommittee. So I guess the 2 committees that were appointed from the Resources Committee are automatically the 2 officers in charge. Is that how it goes? Is that what the legislation says? The other one is the Mr. Mitchell Yahatsi, as far as advisory team. I think that we need to have those advisory team to help out. But the vote in the DA is really to the appointees as far as the ground rules. So just for clarity, I'd like to get a clear clarification on that.
Delegate Susan, before I respond.
This reminds me of setting up the Indian Education Advisory Council. They started fighting over the governance and not the children's education. So, I understand. But I think, Madam Chair, and like I said, I'm glad we are doing this. I think as we go forward, to have some real good, serious discussions on these things. And I appreciate your comment, Madam Chair, saying that let's keep an open mind. And I really hope we'll be able to do that. Because I think, in the end, any resource that we can tap is good. So I think anybody can come in and give us information. If there's a great plan out there, let's hear it, so that we can address these matters. So, but I think this is a subcommittee of the Resource Committee. We have to go back to them for finalization on any legislative effort. And so I don't think we should be fighting about authority. Let's just get down to business and start hearing the data and start hearing the good things on housing and then where we have problems. So, thank you, Madam Chair.
Great. As far as allowing or asking OMB and the Controller's Office to participate, we will certainly do that, and they will provide really good information session. I would like to invite them at some point, but today we're going to go back. I don't know if I'd like to ask our staff to take really good notes, and that can be shared with them in the meantime. But also envision us having a public hearing where we can hear from all concerns. And certainly there are a lot of concerns from, I guess, the former third-party contractors, housing providers. I'd like to hear from them, as well as the public. So I envision us having a really good dialogue with anyone who's interested in this program. Certainly, I'd like to put on record that the Resources and Development Committee who are expressing or showing their interest in this project are definitely invited to stay with us. I said, John and also see Shijek, Director of the Veterans Affairs. Ayun ka jo hitne asli I thought it actually able to. Can we balance out by moving some of you on this side? I also want to correct my statement from earlier where I alluded to Ms. Harrison as the Legislative Counsel, but indeed her title is Legislative Associate. So, I see the Legislative Counsel or Legal Counsel for NHA, Legal Counsel or some legal representation of the Executive Branch, and we have our Vice President providing legal services to the committee. But so that our bill.
One added individual that I'd also like to include is Tanya Vicente from DOJ. Today she's in Santa Fe. So she can speak. Who will be Controller's Office.
I think the way I see this, correct me if I'm wrong, Delegate Sosi, the way I see this, I think for the time being, it should be just good discussion among the committee members. As we move along, I think there will be time for their technical input and audition. I'm of the opinion that as a legislator, we are the legislators. We shouldn't have the lawyers tell us how to legislate and what to do. We'll ask them for make sure that there's no conflicting in laws and stuff. But I choose to make the law myself. So, Delegate Sosi.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I agree. The policy issue is within the realms of the policymaker, and in this case on the nomination, it's the delegates. And that's what people would like us for. And so, I think when we run into some legal issues, then we can ask for the advice from various councils. But this is a policy issue. And where does it belong is not a legal issue. It's a policy issue. So I think the legislature can properly address this. And I agree, Madam Chair. Thank you.
Okay, with that, any other issues or concerns? Only the official members of the subcommittee will vote. There's 6 of us. So, would I need to vote or would I just vote to break the tie? Ms. Allison.
Madam Chair, and members of the subcommittee, according to the standing committee rules, the chairperson of the committee does not vote only in cases of tie. But I vote for chairperson.
With that, if there are not any other concerns, calling for the question to accept the item A of this report. We've set our rules, our ground rules, and how we'll proceed and what we hope to accomplish. All in favor? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favor, 0 opposed. With that, we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is report by the Navajo Housing Authority on the history as the tribally designated entity. Go ahead, Ms. Yasi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We have a handout for the committee members, and we also have a PowerPoint. If we can indulge us with the PowerPoint, we would appreciate it. It won't take too long, just to give you a quick history of the overview.
We have one more gray packet for
Next. Again, just a reiteration of the division and mission statement. You'll have that presented as previously next. And then the current profile of the present TDHE and the overview of how the U.S. Housing Act was initially the program that governed the assistance to tribes for subsidized housing. Now, HOSDA came into play in 1996. It's been amended about 4 times since its inception. And to date, the current TDHE, pursuant to the Council resolution, is maintaining 8,587 housing stock units. And that is a changing number depending on numbers we convey and then the units that we bring online. 29 administrative offices across 3 states, Arizona, New Mexico, and Utah. 15 field offices. And right now we're comprised of 375 personnel to operate, maintain, and provide construction services. The subrecipient program, NHA had instituted back in 1998, and I'll get into that a little bit. Currently we have about 50 subrecipients. Next. Historically, the U.S. Housing Act of 1937 really authorized the creation of Indian housing authorities and public housing authorities. Navajo Nation has created NHA on May 1st of 1963 pursuant to that specific law. Now, housing came into practice and came into play in 1996, physically implemented in October 1 of 1997. The 2 primary components of the 5-year housing plans. So housing plans would dictate how these funds would be spent. Historically, that has been generated locally by the Navajo Housing Authority in concert with respective Navajo Nation divisions as well, and subrecipients back in 1998. There was a 2-year funding obligation requirement applicable for all tribes, that every grant year, as awards are made, you would have to obligate those funds within 2 years. I'll touch on that a little bit more in my presentation. The Navajo Nation government then, by Council Resolution 82-03, designated NHA as its tribally designated housing entity, which was a requirement for the government under HUD to promulgate these grant awards. And so that was effectuated December 23rd of 2003. Through several amendments of the HOSDA, the most recent being the 2008 reauthorization, there were some major components that will affect how we conduct business going forward under NAHASDA. The 5-year plan requirement is no longer applicable. Rather, the government is going to be looking at a 1-year housing plan. So for instance, this year, October 1 of 2011 is the beginning of fiscal year 2012 at the federal level, but it also coincides with the NHA's fiscal cycle as well. So it is just a 1-year housing plan. In effect, the government will only monitor a 12-month performance. And so we implemented this housing plan accordingly. Recall in July of this year, it had passed the Oversight Committee through the Navajo Nation's presidential signature. It's currently under review right now for the 2012, given the appropriations that just recently concluded. But it also eliminates the 2-year obligation requirement. And the history behind that is the government, through the federal oversight, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, had not ever enforced this requirement for tribes across the country, most notably under the Southwest Office of Native American Programs. And thus you have, as a result, since 1998, NHA has never been required to have any kind of recapture provisions for 2-year obligation up through present day. And therefore, what has occurred in terms of balances to the grant program. And one of the other major triggers under this reauthorization, and this is something that NHA has sponsored at the national level, was to allow for economic development using a portion of these funds that is housing related. And for our tribe and the amount that we get, we're capped at $2 million. That really was to get a foot in the door with economic development, which is housing. Thank you. So we have that provision now, so there's opportunity because housing is economic development. These revised regulations was issued just last week, so we are getting copies hot off the press as we speak. We will have copies for the committee members as well. One administrative change that the Department of Housing and Urban Development has engaged as of recent was to consolidate all the grant programs into one singular funding grant, and that was effective October 1 of this year. Physically for NHA, that will take place January 1 of 2012. We are now in the mode of completing our annual performance report, which we will close out all the prior grants and putting it into one singular grant. Next. Under the management, of course, this is just to give you a bird's eye view of the TDHE presently, just so we understand where we're coming from. I came on in February of 2007. There was the Office of Inspector General audit report that came out 4 months later into my new position, where we agreed to a 3-year subrecipient program moratorium. And these would be those housing providers that was mentioned earlier with regard to some of the concerns that they had with NHA. And this was a scathing report, unfortunately, for the Navajo Nation, simply targeting lack of internal controls and inappropriate uses of NAHASDA funds is what was basically cited in that report. This required almost a year and a half of closing activity for violations of a sample of subrecipients, but it was universal with a lot of our subrecipients. The findings have all been closed and cleared. We've revamped policies, establishing internal controls, and maintaining checklists for all our subrecipients. And what, from my opinion, NHA had funded some housing providers that really did not have the capacities from the get-go. There was no due diligence instrument to ensure the viability of some of the entities that created themselves to attain these funds. Nonetheless, though, those findings have been satisfied in December of 2009. About 4 months later, August of 2007, the same year, there was a letter of warning issued by the Department of Housing and Urban Development. This is a consolidation of prior year program monitoring reviews and independent fiscal audits, totaling about 31 regulatory violations called findings. That took a lot of resources and energy to close. Nonetheless, they have all been closed as of December 2010. This included making whole some ineligible costs that NHA had engaged. It also had other regulatory compliance with regard to tenant recertifications, filing of tenants to make sure they were eligible, and the like. So that was a process. Today, our independent fiscal audits are current for 2010 with no outstanding findings. That same year, August of 2007, there was the HUD, Fair Housing and Equal Opportunity Department that came out with a team of 20 people to review the Section 504 of the Rehabilitation Act of 1973. These are all the disability compliance with respect to hearing impaired, visual impaired, and hearing impaired. That was a deficiency report that was issued to us formally in August of 2009. This is the first ever HUD review team from Fair Housing that has ever entered the Navajo Nation with respect to the Indian Housing Block Grant Program. We surmise that because of the violations that have been issued prior, NHA was on HUD's radar. Nonetheless, though, we engaged a 7-year voluntary compliance agreement, and we are currently in process of making those deficiencies whole, resolving those deficiencies. And last but not least, we had issues with the Southwest Office of Native American Program in the lack of technical assistance and the lack of timely decision-making. And so there was a request for a transfer of the oversight to the Denver Office of Native American Programs simply because they oversee large land-based tribes, and that's where we felt we had some commonality as opposed to small rancherias in California, which were just not fitting some of the problem resolutions that we have with housing on the Navajo. So that was effected and approved by HUD October 1, 2011 for just the IHPG program. Next. Some of the immediate management initiatives since then, in addition to operating and maintaining 8,500 units day-to-day, in addition to all the findings that have been corrected, and to date we stand clean. We are totally compliant in all respects. HUD program review, OIG, and independent fiscal audits. But we've also assisted in passing the Indian Veterans Opportunity Act to help our disabled Native veterans. Our ERA funds expenditure and obligation are going to be totally met with those milestones. We have one last milestone, May 18th, which we will expend these funds before that deadline. We've also reorganized the Navajo Housing Authority with a reclassification and compensation structure. And we've completed the first ever housing needs assessment for the Navajo Nation that was done in August of 2011. We've also moved to a new competency-based performance management system that was implemented October 1st of this year in 2011. And that really is to move towards a total quality work management and staff accountability. Next. Housing needs assessment, I presented this to the RDC, just a reiteration. Next. Obviously, this TDHE, when we talk about how we're going to, how we're going to structure and what the entity would be, the challenge has been set forward in terms of 34,100 new homes that are needed, and then 34,300 of existing homes that need major repairs, where they're structurally sound, but they need some repairs and or extensions. Next. And all of this with regard to NAHASDA being an income-based program, that over 70% of our families make less than $15,000. That's a huge challenge, and we know we need to look at that. So you'll see some of the photos taken here, which are typical in a lot of our outlying communities. Next. As a result of this needs assessment, some of the program policy development, which we've known, now we have data to support this before Congress and before anyone else who inquires on housing. We know we need to create an elderly housing assistance program, a veterans housing program, special needs housing for our disabled individuals, home ownership programs, a home grant program where folks don't have any type of earned income because of unemployment, no employment, and they're truly indigent. A home needs to just be built outright with no payment required. Lease to own, lease to purchase, and mortgages. We have the high-end, or relatively what we call high-end, where we have folks that do make income above the low-income thresholds. We can engage in some mortgage instruments that could be subsidized and or conventional. There's also a need of the self-help repair program. We have some repair needs as identified by the needs assessment study. Supportive housing for a lot of our disabled vets that need, or our veterans, that not disabled, but our veterans that might need some housing. Domestic violence, victims of domestic violence, and homeless families. So that would be needed. In the end, a one-stop housing assistance center, and this, I believe, is the objective of this TDHE, when you're looking at consolidating all housing programs so our families can go to one stop and be served with all triage of what their needs are, and then we have a product on the back end. Next. In part, the TDHE, as we study it, NHA will continue to move towards a master planning, regional master planning approach to utilizing these funds. And I think it's going back to the community members and letting them devise what it is they need for their families, and working from the grassroots level on up. And previously it had been the other way around. So NHA has been engaging in a technology, land information management system technology, and working with these respective entities, NTUA, BIA, so that we can overlay a lot of the information for a given community so that we can effectively plan from the get-go. And this would be integral to community development as well as economic development. Next. And this is, we've done the whole aerial topo of the entire Navajo Nation. Next. And these are just some initiatives. And I think this is good to present here only to look at some of the things that were already identified in terms of some of the federal bureaucracies with HUD, DIA, USDA, VA, Health and Human Services, to eliminate or reduce the red tape where some regulations are conflicting and or are protract the process for timely development. Next. Here is the crux. Presently, we are in a great opportunity and position now that we've demonstrated capacity. NHA, the average annual IHBG now is about 90 to 95 million. Title VI is the loan guarantee program offered by HUD. We can leverage these funds up to 5 times our block grant amount. Tax-exempt bond financing for a TDHE, you can also leverage up to 5 times your block grant amount. There are other federal grants that NHA has not sought simply because of the position it was holding with the multitude of violations. We are now at a state where we've demonstrated that capacity. We can engage now a lot of these grants that are available from these various entities. State programs, there's infrastructure financing, Arizona, New Mexico that have not been tapped into by NHA or a TDHE. Housing trust funds, low-income housing tax credits. VA, this is a legislation we need to pursue to ask the federal national VA to allow the TDHE to be a borrower under their direct loan program. 184 is a mortgage loan guarantee program. This is something that we would like to engage with NHA as the borrower, and then on the backside having an agreement with tribal members. But all of this combined, we have an immediate potential of about 1.2 billion minimum to help start addressing housing and related infrastructure. Next. So, Madam Chair, that really was the history of the TDHE, where it was and where it is now, and that was to give you a quick glimpse. Thank you.
Okay, motion by the committee member to accept this report. Delegate Sosi, second? Second? Delegate, or Mr. Mitchell. Delegate Mitchell. Ashwini Wadon, thank you, questions or comments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. A couple of questions and comments. One on the public rental. I think it would be good to see the rent amounts and how it's determined. I've been told that these are tied to the rents that are paid at the municipality area, even though the two are very different. So I think it would be good to see that. The other one, if you could, I guess, get us the actual CFR thing, maybe in digital format or paper format, on the TDHE, so we can see what it says. I was trying to look it up on the internet. The other one is if you could get us a copy of the housing needs assessment. If it's too thick, maybe give it to us in a digital format. And going back to the public need and even the home ownership, I'm interested in the evictions that are happening. And what rate, what's going on, why. Because once you evict someone, they're homeless again. Oncino was there recent. They're telling me that those NHA housing are just boarded up because of the legal dilemmas. It was going through some legal proceeding and a determination can't be made. And I think, as part of this whole housing picture, what's going on. And then we talked about how some what states are running public housing programs, and what have they done? So, I think at a certain point, I think we need, if the TDHEs will go back to NHA, I like to hear if the board thing is working. You know, you ran into all this trouble with the board, on board. And that tells me that the board thing is not working. There was nobody on the lookout, and you ran into problems. And why was that? You know, and I think if we don't resolve that, I would be leery of sending it back to there. So those are some questions and some thoughts on it. I think as we go forth, the idea is, how do we design a program, replace a program like this, for as much housing for Navajo, as many housing for Navajo people as possible. And it's only recent, it looks like, that NHA is finally getting to elderly, disabled, and veteran housing. You know, you've existed for a long time, and this goes back to, again, the board. That the board wasn't working. All they do, it probably sounds like, is they come in for a meeting, you know, they hopefully not understand your efforts and then just move on. Rather than, you know, it was there for a policy matter to discuss and see how they could do better. And now these things are just finally not coming out as a result. I think it would be nice to see, Madam Chair, a summary of all these things, that, especially like the moratorium and what has happened, what was involved. Again, you know, if it's going to go back to NHA, how do we guard against that? So those are some of the thoughts that have come to my mind. And of course, on your mention of IHBG, but I guess, I don't know if we're going to wait for, maybe the subcommittee here should be invited to that meeting with all the leasing that Rex Cook's report, where we're going to be talking about obstacles to leasing and other things on the Navajo Nation. So, any additional dialogue? Thank you, Madam Chair.
I want to invite all of the entities again to our Wednesday's meeting, because committee's going to hear a special meeting to hear what hinders and any progress, obstacles, and bring a solution. What law? This is a hush that has ani. We want that law that hinders you, so we can throw it in the fire. No. Mr. Mitchell?
Yeah, the presentation here, moving forward on the TDHE. Probably at the next meeting, we'd like to see a planning and implementation process, the approval process. Where does it start? How many blocks do we go through? Then also at the same time, from our side, from the Navajo Nation central government, we need to also compare and look at our approval process. That should give us an idea on some of the barriers and all that. So the ADD, based on the report that was given. The other one that we need to look at and we need to provide a recommendation is the 1-year housing plan. Say it in 5 years, maybe. Say it in 5 years, maybe. The 1 year. One of the things that is a concern and related to that. A lot of times we can't respond. Even myself, I can't respond. It's because of the approval process. How do we get on the lists? Is this one thing? House ADD, under the 2 years requirement on the new legislation to 2016, to extend I don't know, ADD. Although the other one that we like to see to provide the recommendation is the regulation from the House or the regulations, the policy that governs the House that then audits, you see that they're all clear and close. Under the needs assessment, the housing needs assessment, that should be a tool that we need to use on how to go forward. One of the things that I like to know is that the other housing providers from other tribes that they have a teleconference on a needs assessment. Although I wonder if I guess this was the question to NHA. I wonder if it's the same questions that we use for NHA. Because we don't want to be going in a different direction from the other housing. They had a teleconference. These are our comments on the needs assessment and all that. No, I hate to be going in the wrong direction from the other. Down in Phoenix, we don't want to be having a different questionnaires. That's a question to NHA. Under the housing FY11 7.5, I guess this is a question too to NHA. The plan is that the chapter. I wanted to. I keep postponing. ASU. We met with ASU, and then they did a proposal. I sent it back to them, and then they wanted to meet again, but we haven't met. Next Tuesday that they needed, but seems like it probably might not happen. So in case, just to give you some information, on the planning portion for chapters. Mapping, we really need this mapping. From BRA, NHA, and all that. And we like to tie that into the chapter planning, the 7.5, somehow plan. So just some comments, Madam Chair, on the presentation that was provided. Also, just a little historic information. 1996, I was in one of the meetings. But as a Navajo, we weren't set up to receive the 80 million. So what we did at that meeting was that Mr. Carl, he was the director at that time. The Navajo Nation sets up, meaning how to receive money, and then being capable of managing the millions of dollars finance. The issue was on financing. The issue was on finance that time. How can we funnel all this money through the system? So anyway, I remember that meeting, and Mr. Carl, I remember we met on this one. So just a little history behind this Nahazda. I need a report. Just some comments, and then based on the reports, how do we arrive at our reports, our finding, our recommendations. And then just the other two questions that I posed. And so, Madam Chair.
Delegate Sosi and Mr. Mitchell. response now? Or just move on, take notes of all those, and then I don't want to go on to the next item on the agenda. Mr. John?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to also make some comments regarding the report. One of the things is, I guess, kind of interested in is the details in the audit findings. I think that's where we need to really address some of those issues. And from there, we might be able to recommend or come up with some policies or even housing codes to address these and some processes. I think that's where we really need to look at those audit issues, monitoring issues, and so forth. The other one is the funding distribution. I kind of like to interested in seeing how much is. I know that on paper it says that the housing management of the 38 houses is supposed to get so much. But how much is actually in there? How much is program income, and how many homes are ready to be conveyed? And those type of information I think will be very valuable to the group in terms of looking at the housing industry. So maybe those information as far as the distribution of funds among the programs as well as the program income. Where do you go?
Okay, those will all be noted and all the responses will be brought back at the next meeting. Okay, with that, we're going to the next. Oh, we have a motion and a second to accept this report with all of the questions. I hope the staff kept track of all the questions and as well as the presenters. For that, let's accept this report. All in favor of accepting this report? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favor. 0 opposed. None abstained. So we have accepted the report from the Navajo Housing Authority. With that, we're going to item C, report by the Division of Community Development on the history of being recognized as the Navajo House as a housing department within the Navajo Nation government executive branch.
Thank you, Shane. Mr. John will cover a lot of these items. So from the Navajo Nation housing, just a little quick history on housing. Mr. John will cover the details. So then there's some handouts on these reports. Navajo Nation as a housing program, we used to receive like 5 million to 6 million a while back. About 5-6 years ago, Mr. Leslie Deal, it was redistributed to the chapters. So those monies it became housing discretionary funds. So that's where the housing discretionary started. So here at the central level, the monies from general funds that goes to housing, it's only like 400,000. I couldn't just to monitor some of these housing activities within Navajo Nation. How's that? That's just some added information. Mr. John on Navajo Nation housing program.
Thank you for that, Chair. Just wanted to give an overview. Before I start, I would like to kind of just go over the handout that I gave the committee members. This is a handout that we put together regarding the meeting for today. The first one is the legislation, and the legislation on the formulation of the subcommittee, the TDHE Study Subcommittee, and of course you also see the letter from President Shelley appointing Mr. Mitchell and myself to the committee. that's on the first handout. The second handout is just some information on the transfer of the TDHE or the transfer of oversight of the housing from the Southwest Office of Native American Programs to Northern Claims Office in Denver. So just for your information, that's also included. Also included in the handout, the third tab is the most recent information on the TDHE, which is the funding for FY12. It was mentioned earlier in the announcement that money has been appropriated and there's no defunding of Navajo. So that's all in there. Also in here is the a former freeze summary, former better freeze area summary of what's been happening in the area of the former better freeze area, and some statistics and some information on housing and development in that area. Also attached is a proposed housing plan that was submitted to NHA. This was submitted about 2 years or 3 years ago to Mr. Roger Boyd and his group. And at that time, they wanted to entertain some information on Navajo housing need within Navajo. And in here, it talks about the burnouts, it talks about the veterans, and the benefits area, as well as some of the new construction. Okay. The last page is just some census information that's regarding census 2010. So this is for your review whenever you have time to include to be included in the one of the report or discussions. Also, I also have some information on the housing as far as division housing discretionary funds distribution to the chapters. I don't know if you want to, I can probably hand these out in a little bit. I also have the allocation from HIP as well as for the past 10, 12 years. So that's also for your information. And lastly, I wanted to bring this up to the committee. The previous administration, under condition of appropriation, placed on the Division of Community Development and the Community Housing Infrastructure, did a legislation to conduct a feasibility study on the TDHE. And with that, we were able to contract out JJ Class to do a feasibility study on the TDHE. And I have that report here. The committee, the former committee, the TCDC committee, did not have a chance to thoroughly go through the review. Therefore, the report was never accepted or sanctioned by the committee. We did have a subcommittee that we were working with, and time just ran out on them. That they didn't get a chance to really review the reports and the recommendation. There's basically 4 recommendations that was made on the TDHE in this report. I don't know how the subcommittee want to approach this. Maybe they want to review the committee and then determine what needs to be updated or changed, or we could thoroughly go through that and see where we can make some recommendation or changes. So that's something that I wanted to bring up. Now, as far as the Division of Community Development, Community Infrastructure, housing services have been in existence. There's always been a housing need. Housing services have been in existence until 2008, I believe it was. That's when there was a study that was done by Pacific Western Technologies to merge a lot of the housing program with Navajo Nation within the Division of Community Development. And therefore, the CDBG department and the Navajo Housing Services Department were merged into one. And that became the Community Housing and Infrastructure. And mainly, they were merged because they dealt with residential areas, residential development. And under CDBG, we deal with water lines and power lines and so forth. And then under BIA, we deal with reservation and construction. And also the weatherization, they deal with energy efficiency measures. And that all relates to residential need on the community level. The other one is from there, we were able to get some HASDA funding through a subrecipient agreement. Unlike the moratorium, I think the Navajo Nation was given an okay to go ahead and be the subrecipient, mainly because under that time, our report, our monetary report, was pretty much done and in order. And with that, we were able to get a letter indicating that we were an exception to the moratorium. And we were able to get some bathroom addition as well as some construction funds as well. So I don't know how the committee wants to deal with this, but this is a report that was done, consulted out, and put together. And as I mentioned, the former TCDC committee never had a chance to formally go through it and formally accept it as a report. Madam Chair.
Have a motion to accept this report. Delegate Sosi, second by Ms. Yazzie. Questions and comments? Delegate Sosi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. On the effort to move all dollars to the chapter in the forms of housing discretionary, I think it would be nice to see a report if that is working. Some of us feel that they are not working. And just giving out $500 doesn't build a house. And I don't know if that's being then classified as building a house at chapter level. So we're not fixing the housing problem. I think with since the veteran is coming up, I'm aware during my practicing days in representing the veteran, that the veteran did a similar thing to where they gave him over $2,000 and classified that as a finished project. You can't build a house for $2,000. But yet, it seems like it's an effort to get rid of these requests and classify it as finished projects. So I don't know if that's going on. If it is, it's not fair to Navajo people to do that. That's the main thing I think it'd be good to see. And on the feasibility study that was done, whether it's been formally adopted or not, I think it would be nice to see it. I just want the information to make things better. One thing that has come out too is going back to me, but since we're all in one meeting though, is the reason why Navajo Housing Authority decided to move itself from the Phoenix operation, HUD operation, to the Denver HUD operation. I think it would be neat to see the rationale or the reasons for that, why that happened. And it was interesting that one of the board members of NHA got offended when I said that, you're kind of like orphans, it's just being bounced here and there. And the Denver office was not so willing to formally accept NHA and rather classify them as temporary placements. And so it's real similar to the district, why it's not always, I don't know, a similar thing is not happening now with that. But the other thing too, Madam Chair, and I think thought comes to mind too, is I know change. And the reason why I say that is whenever I go out to chapter meetings, people tell me, I've been on this list for 20 years. And I've been making this request. And what happened to my application? That there is no dialogue. Even, everybody had, every one of these applicants had addresses. And there was no formal letter from either the division director or from the housing program back to Navajo people saying that we extend our apologies, but your request doesn't matter anymore because it's been changed. See, and this information then is done through the delegates as they report back. And we take a beating for that at the chapter level for making that report. And I know, I think at one of the chapter, I said that there's really, you'll be on this list forever, you won't get housing. And I think somehow that communication with Navajo people needs to be done in a certain way. And even as we place this TDHE, how do we communicate with Navajo people on whether it's for public housing, for home ownership, or disabled housing? How do we set that up, the communication structure, so that Navajo people are informed about the progress of their application, and if their application is being thrown out, let them know. And put your John Henry or your Jane Henry there, so you take the responsibility for making that determination. Now, it seems like all these delegates take the beating for you. When we go to chapter meetings and tell them that this is what we heard, and that their application is no more, and then, of course, then people get irate over it. And we sit there and we just take the punishment for you. That's what happens, including the veterans. And so people get very, and rightfully so, because they thought they were on the list. And all of a sudden we're telling them that is no more. So I'll be interested in seeing letters after what Council Delegate Deal did. Were any letters sent out? And if so, I'd like to see sample copies. And if it didn't go out, then that confirms what I'm saying, that we don't communicate with Navajo people on the negative decisions that were made regarding your housing application. Because like I said, many of them are still out there thinking that they're still on the list. And I hear that every time. So any of that, call. But I think, what I'm thinking, because we're trying to consider where to place TDHE. And I think many of these questions to Navajo Housing Authority also is applicable to Community Development Division. Because are you going to do any better? And if you're not going to do any better, you can't place it with you. Then we have to look at a third alternative. Or how do we design the placement of TDHE? So I think those are things that I would recommend that when we ask these questions, that you also take that as a question to you, so that you could advise the subcommittee and even the president and the resource committee when we do our report, that here's a better plan. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Ms. Yelsey?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Questions to the presenter. I think in turn, not being privy to a lot of the reports or self-assessments of the use of discretionary funds, that would be interesting to see too. If audits, again, I appreciate Mr. John's question on seeing the audits and seeing what we have corrected and what we've instituted so that it does not reoccur. That really drives to some systemic issues, and I would like to see that with the Navajo Nation's SHID department as well. What reports and audits have been issued and what have been the corrective remedies so that we can understand some of these systemic issues that perhaps we can overt in terms of looking at the placement of a permanent TDHE. The other note is, could I have a copy of that TDHE study report? I'd like to get a copy of that. And thank you.
comments? We're all taking notes of questions posed to us, right? We'll have them all in written forms. All the documents being requested will be given to a member of the six committee members. Delegate or Mr. Johns?
Super Six.
Super Six.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, I also wanted to add that, there was some other legislation that led to the distribution of funding to the chapters. And one of them I have here, which is the City versus Denali versus the City case. And that relates to some of the reasons why housing discretionary funds was established. And I'll give copies to the committee as well. You have copies here. And the TDHE report is also available. I'm sure there's a lot of good recommendations, a lot of good information, good history of how the TDHE was formulated, and some assessments on the program itself. So it contains a lot of information. Perhaps a lot of the questions could probably be retrieved from that feasibility study. It is about 2 years old, but I'm sure the only thing that needs updating is probably a lot of some of the statistical information. Otherwise, I think it's a pretty good report that was put together.
Okay, any other questions or comments? Committee members? All questions are noted, all documents requested are noted and will be brought forward. And we will also review the assessment done. Although the feasibility study, AA Shifan. With that, committee members, we do have a motion and a second to accept the report from Community Development Committee, or Division of Community Development. I do want to add, not only is it former delegate Bill's move to give chapters the housing discretionary funds, I think there was actually a lawsuit against the Navajo Nation, and that might be the Benami versus City. There was a lawsuit against the Navajo Nation by a community member stating the unfairness of the Navajo Nation's practice in allocating funds for housing. That caused the move for giving it to the chapters. But we all, in that move, chapter officials, they are the ones that actually give those funds out to the tune of a huge $500 per applicant. Buying maybe a door, maybe a window. So, but I don't think this up. She aunt ended all the lawsuits, all the decisions made by the council, and so forth. And how do we bring all of this back if necessary? And put it together. Look at the report given by Housing Division of Community Development in fiscal year 8, 9, 10, and 11. We spent $37,304. Oh, that couldn't all be built. How many homes depends on how much you pay per house. I always say I can build a small 2-bedroom house for $15,000. Charity homes that I built, very basic. And NHA bills them for excess of $150,000. CDBG bills them for excess of $150,000. In my book, those are luxury homes. So, we'll probably need to institute a policy and all that, and those things. Thank you. Delegate Session.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And to my mind, the of this TDHE placement and the policy regarding it, that there's strong housing need out there, and we don't have time to build luxury homes. But yet that appears to be happening. And when you do that, you shortchange those people that were on the waiting list. And so I think it'll be interesting to maybe see a report from community development and housing programs on the costs per housing, maybe over certain years that you'd like to look at. And even veteran housing. How much is it housing per, how much is it costing per house? And you might justify why an alpine house is necessary on the Navajo Nation. I think it'll be interesting to see that. And then I think, I know NHA and NHA dollars, I don't know how the dollars is for community development too, and other things. I think it'll be interesting to see dollars that were dedicated to those other quote-unquote non-housing or supportive type of thing for housing. Because it will tell us that, you know, where the programming, where they're at, is it working? I think that's a big question. And if we're building houses where, alpine houses where a utility can't get to it, what's the sense? And if we see a lot of that happening, who's responsible for that? And one could argue that that's a waste of tribal dollars, housing dollars. So, because, like I said, you spend so much on one house. You know, I don't mind people doing it with their own dollars. It's their prerogative. But when you're doing it with public dollars, then it's a different story to me. Every time I go home, you know, and make reports, the number one concern that people express to me is housing. I don't know if you're aware too that Navajo Nation committee did submit a list to BIA on BIA priorities. And they put housing as number one again. And so I think we need to share that resolution with the subcommittee. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Bushi, any other comments, committee members? All in favor of accepting the report by the Division of Community Development? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 in favor, 0 opposed. Thank you. We'll go on to item D, report by the Department of Veterans Affairs on the history as a recipient of Nahasta funding. Mr. Diaz, Kutadole Chajan, Kutadole Amr Bukave, Saskatchewan.
By the years of housing units that were built, Nahasta built, what I did was black up, that's on the name part. You can see a little bit of the name if you look closely.
And this is using the Nahasta funds, right?
Oh,
okay.
Because, a little bit of history on our participation in the Department of Veterans Affairs received a subcontract on NHA back in the year 2000 to build 58 homes. Since then, at that time, there was a 2-year obligation that was in effect. the numbers changed to 46 after going about for implementing that sub-grant agreement. Within that 2-year period, the sub-grant, without any funding obligations, so NHA recaptured that money. The administrative part, some of the administration money of that sub-grant was spent. But NHA took it back, and instead of redistributing the funds, NHA decided to go ahead and build those homes. They built those homes. Since then, at that time too, the housing policies, they revised it to include that NAHASDA fund, the use of the NAHASDA funding. And in that policies, there were some policy statements that were not in line with the regulations of HUD. One of those things was that the maximum amount that would be the monthly payment was $200. The HUD regulation says that it was supposed to be based on income. So that's where the policies were not acceptable to NHA at the time. Although the eligibility determination done by the Department of Veterans Affairs were not in line with the HUD regulation again, meaning that low-income families can get up to 80% of the U.S. median income are eligible for NAHASDA funding. Some of the participants that were selected by the Department of Veterans Affairs were not eligible, determined not eligible at that time. Some of the homes were already built. Since then, we did a memorandum of agreement with NHA where we just provide the applications to their eligibility technicians on their side. When the funds were recaptured, the funding for administering the sub-grant went back, so that the staff that were hired by DNVA to implement the housing terminated at that point. So since then, we've just been operating through a referral. Through a referral process, we use our waiting list and send an application over to NHA, and the NHA eligibility or the resident intake officer makes the determination, qualifies them. When they qualify them, everything's in place, and it's sent to construction. So since then, there's 62 units that were built that not built, but some of them moved in. Some of them are in construction phase, and then some of them in planning phase. And then we still have a waiting list at the agency level. I provide this report as well, broken down by agencies, of the number of units, and indicated by their status, if they're completed or in construction phase or in planning phase. Maybe I need to have this. Maybe I see. We do have veterans that are high income, that are not eligible for NAHASDA. And then there's veterans that are indigent, that can't afford to buy a home under NAHASDA as it is now. But we do have plans in coordination with NHA to provide grant numbers. It would probably require a mention fund situation to do that. Our housing, the veterans housing that is funded by general funds, the VA. Those are identified as financial assistance. Financial assistance for housing, meaning housing material. There's no labor cost, that's no equipment cost, no foundation material. So those veterans houses are built in coordination with the chapters, and we use the PEP people, we use the chapter equipment to do the foundation, and a lot of time we can't meet those, and some of them are under self-help. Is just buying the material. Some of them are asking for a complete house, and then some of them are like renovation, repairs that they do. So we do have minor and major renovation and repairs along with these complete houses. They complete houses, at least one per agency, so that's a big fund. So we're not in a complete housing entity. We don't have the capacity to build a complete home. So we live to coordinate other housing and this, putting all the housing program under one is an idea that I perceive as a good idea, because when we separate them, we kind of fall short in a lot of areas. We need to reinvent the whole reservation housing program and put it under one program. That way that everybody can get treated the same. Because in these cases, people get treated differently at each one of these programs. They are all on such case of Thank you.
Motion to accept this report by Ms. Yazzie, second by Mr. John. Questions or comments? Committee members, Delegate Sosi, and Ms. Yazzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. One of the issues that have been coming up with NHA is the sub-recipients in the veteran program. I think at a certain time too, we need to hear about issues regarding sub-recipients. And if we move TDHE back to the Navajo Nation, who do we make our sub-recipients? What I envision is then NHA becomes a sub-recipient. And then the chapter would become separate, special certified chapters. They become a sub-recipient. The veteran program would become a sub-recipient. And then, the whole program transforms into a different thing. And so, but the thing about it is, when I say sub-recipient working, then if NHA had to recapture your dollars, that means that your veteran sub-recipiency didn't work. Why did it not work? Is it the overwhelming regulations by NHA, or it would be interesting to see that. The other one too, the referral program. Did your office do follow up on that to see? First, you were, I think, given what you're describing, you were given the ability to try to do this yourself. It didn't work. It was recaptured. Then you went to a referral program. So that the veterans program, then office, go and check on what NHA is doing to see how many of its referral worked out in terms of housing, what kind of housing for veterans. It would be interesting to see that also. I know we have more than And so, how many of the veterans actually have adequate housing? And how many do not? As of today. And so we could see what's going on with respect to veterans program. In the example that I mentioned, the veteran was trying to get a house built, and there was a land dispute. What is going on with these land disputes, and how many of housing denials are a result of that? Because I think as part of this leasing matter on Wednesday, something that we could look at also, and all the housing along 491 is full of housing disputes or land disputes because people want to get a home-site lease closer to a road. Is that a big reason why we have housing failure? And so then we turn this back around against the Navajo people themselves, that they themselves are denying their fellow Navajos housing. And so this being trust land, it's not be simple ownership. As the time Navajo Nation take a different direction on how it does what idea is housing zones. And should there be like veteran housing zones? That's all. Just some thoughts, Madam Chair, and members of the subcommittee. Thank you.
Ms. Yazzie?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Mr. Ness. My question, and I think that maybe subcommittee members also asked it, do you have a complete inventory of all the veterans and full body agency? I think there's a certification process you go through, and I think that's one of the initiatives we have always been seeking prior to your directorship, but we still want to seek that just the same. And had there been any attempts by the DA under your directorship to seek out what state agencies as well as federal agencies offer for our veterans? One of the initiatives that Imogen wants to pursue is the DA Home Direct Loan Program is really underutilized, and I think it was under recent attack to reduce those loan authorities accordingly because it's not utilized. But I don't know how much lobbying or education of our congressional members are. It's underutilized, we believe, is because our veterans, first of all, don't have employment and therefore can't seek any type of capital, don't have any type of capital down payment enforcement costs for these loan guarantees for mortgages. And so what we would like to do is change the law to allow nations, TDHEs, to be able to re-empower that program, much like HUD's 184 program, where TDHE can re-empower and maximize, I think, the loan authorities that has been set aside by VA, and in turn, get infrastructure financing on the front end on behalf of our veterans, and on the backside have an occupancy source for the various income ranges of our veterans. That's something that we still like to seek and still on our initiative. Currently, as we stand as a TDHE, but I think there's not much that's been utilized even at the state level. And so I think it's really seeking those resources to really maximize what's available to our veterans. But it really is coming back to identifying and grasping what the needs are for our veterans in the various income ranges and the various status of veterans that pick across the Navajo Nation. Madam Chair.
Any other questions or comments? Committee members? Clause 9. Mr. John?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to kind of add that coming up with a standard policy for design, there might be something that we will probably look at, mainly because, I passed out a sheet of paper here earlier regarding the discretionary funds. And right now, a lot of chapters are coming in wanting to know if we have plans available. Do we have plans? What kind of floor plans do we have? What kind of specs do we have? And usually there's really none out there. Because if you contract out a lot of design work, they have stamps on there. And when they have a stamp on there, there's liability involved. But if the Navajo Nation or the TDHE or whoever comes up with a standard what did you call it, Ponderosa houses, then that will be the standard that they can use across the board. Veteran can use that, housing discretionary funds can use that, and any other housing providers can use that. And I think that's where some of these standardization and uniform policies and codes needs to come into place. Just wanted to make that comment. Thank you.
Any other questions or comments? You noted all those. You're welcome to participate in all of our future meetings. Yes, it's like it's a lot so bad that all the instructions there. Any other questions or comments? If none, all in favor of accepting this report? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 in favor, 0 opposed. We'll go to the next item on the agenda. The business part will take some time. Okay, I think we are done with all of the reports. Anyone else wish to give a report? Members of the audience? Mr. John?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to give out another report. I have a very limited copy of this report, but this is the Act and the Navajo Nation Code that establishes the NHA and all the resolutions. I'd like to give this to maybe the chair so we can get copies or somewhere for the rest of the group. I only have 3 copies here. Just want to
Is it the same?
No, this is a supplement to that.
Oh, great.
These contains all the regulations and the laws and the codes and the resolutions. So I'll make my Mr. Sosi's work a little easier.
Go ahead. We'll accept that as part of your report. Again, all of the documents, journal, copies and everything, I think enough for 6, maybe even additional. Ms. Roberts?
I have a few to add to everybody's homework and reading. I do have the housing needs assessments for committee members and also the federal regs that just came out last week.
Great. Okay, great. Well, we have a lot more reading materials. That's now Gallup Independent, you're kidding me. Was it in any of their recent editorial or anything? It sounded like by Vito or something like that. She kept calling me about that, and I kept referring her to you because I didn't have one. Indeed, this is the same stuff you gave us on a stick too, right? Okay, I have it. Kashin, any other concerns? Audience, media, documents. Anyone else? Kashin, with that, all in favor of accepting this? Oh no, we've done that. We're going on to old business. 6, we have none. On to new business. Develop a plan of action to complete the assigned tasks of the tribally designated housing entity study subcommittee. Plan of action. The goal is to put this enterprise somewhere that will accessible to everybody. I'm aware that NHA has a plan. There's nothing secret about that. I don't know if Division of Community Development has a plan. We like to hear that. We're going to afford NHA their plan. We're going to afford Division of Community Development their plan. And I believe we have a plan. So we'll put all of them on the table. Have at it, Ms. Yazzie.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Our plan, I don't have that fingertips. Obviously, they tried to designated housing entity as I've seen it, and I know I've worked other tribes. I worked my background. I'm an industrial engineer by profession in education. I worked as an engineer for 14 years before I went to private consultancy, and my whole work occupation has been in the housing arena. So I've had the opportunity to look at other tribes across the country, including Alaska, looking at how they're profiled as organizations and how they have also been delivering housing for their tribal members. I do know 2 of 7 tribes that have attempted to bring the TDHE within their governmental nation. It has not worked. We will get that information from the HUD offices, simply because it is a very complex and technical program. And I say that not to dissuade folks to say that it's not doable. It's just complicated simply because you have about 7 federal agencies nationally that have a housing policy across the board. That, in addition to state agency housing policies that at times TDHEs would seek in terms of leverage funding, all in the mix of administering a housing program really then brings out these unique challenges to housing, in addition to just the administrative requirements of Department of Labor getting wage decisions, procurement, making sure that things are done open and fair competition, and documenting that. I stand before this subcommittee, and we will really hash out. And I do agree, and if the TDHE should not reside within NHA, then that will come to fruition. That will be very obvious. But at this point, I think with TDHEs across the nation, I'm talking about this from an objective viewpoint, is that it should be not independent, quasi-independent. It obviously is going to be overseen by the Navajo, by the tribal government. But it should be an entity that consolidates all housing programs. The fragmentation, as we've heard from everyone here on the subcommittee, including veterans, it is too fragmented, and that speaks to inefficiency for our people. And there's no centralization of all these needs, and how do you communicate that to the masses, our people? And so it only lends itself to say that it should be a completely consolidated entity. So you have an entire umbrella. This TDHE should be one umbrella with a focus of all housing-related programs into one entity. And we'll decide, I guess, the term of what that entity should be, as well as how it should be structured. In the realm of the constrained federal funding environment across the country for all programs, I don't know how much time I have. I'm almost through. Okay. In the realm of this reduced federally funded environment, it really behooves tribal nations, not only Navajo, but everyone across the board, to look at economic development and really be more business-minded, business approach, because leveraging now becomes even more critical, stretching that dollars that we can really address more housing or services for our people.
Ms. Yazzie, proposal even I haven't heard the community development, but I think maybe show us on the board. Can a couple of guys muscles, the tingle, the sun and then does on the jaha.
Madam Chair, although lunch is here, initiating a sponsored lunch.
Oh, right, thank you.
We couldn't get scared.
Hey, I saw that streets the patch. I saw you kiss what you cut in the way. Now he sings like.
So, when we talk about an umbrella, I don't know if you can see all this. I like this analogy of an umbrella, where everything is under one. Because there's a law right now in the House that talks about a TDHE, and that does fund a TDHE for all tribal nations, it would behoove tribal governments, and here for our Navajo, to identify that as an entity. And as an entity, under HUD, we currently have about 8,500 previously funded, or I should say HUD-financed units that has to be maintained, and as part of this funding formula. And at the next subcommittee meeting, I will provide the mechanics of that funding formula. And what does that mean, and how are these units relevant to that formula every year? And what are some of our constraints of maintaining and the character of 1937 housing units, and how that's critical, as opposed to reverting some of those to homeownership, where there are some constraints. Additionally, because we have VA programs, VA housing, SHID housing, there's a housing component in SHID that's general funds, tribal general funds, and I believe these are general funds. We have VIA HIP housing, those are federal funds. And then we have other federal, that either the tribe engages for related infrastructure or housing. So that's integral to what we do. And this is infrastructure and housing combined. The idea here, ideally, is our people are going to all of these various programs, traveling from afar, locally at the chapter levels. And what would be ideal is if we had just one entranceway for our families come in. It could be a VA family that has a veterans need. It could be a family that has disability needs with certain housing. It could be housing for workforce housing. We did not even address some of our employee housing where we can generate some revenue. And then college housing, our college students. What are some voucher programs, or what can we do with cities and create an apartment or multifamily development in the institutions where they're at, Phoenix, Albuquerque. And supportive housing. We have a real need with domestic violence now arising in the community. Drug-related type of activity that's happening where people need these services, but they need permanent housing, and you can wrap the services around that. And then, of course, home ownership. That really is the goal of home ownership for every Navajo family on the reservation. And these could be various spectrums of high income. What does that mean? Moderate income, medium income, low income, very low income, to no income. You know, some families are truly indigent. How can we fashion products that fit all of this? And so we would come in and triage that family. We have a program and really identify all the program services that our nation needs. And in part, that needs assessment does identify that. And triage them to see what that need is. And then make those, offer them the various programs that this TDHE would be creating and maintaining At the same time, because we have to leverage, this whole federal funding environment is going to change come 2013. It's going to be across the board cut. As we understand, the Supercommittee has not reached an agreement, and because they've not reached an agreement, they will default now to an entire across the board cut for all federal programs. That will happen in 2013. So this is opportune, I think, to have this discussion as well. So we have to look at leverage resources and revenue generating mechanisms, we call it, so that we can continue to bring in new money, outside money. So if we can maximize these two mechanisms, we can look at federal programs. We've not maxed that out. There will be some grant entities. Not going to go out the window. There will be some opportunities for grants at the federal level and state level. But then it's also being diligent and looking at tax-exempt bond financing. And this, as a TDHE, not the Navajo Nation government, Navajo Nation can pursue something similar, but as a TDHE, we can engage this. I've done this very successfully with other tribes. And we can look at the loan guarantees that are being offered by HUD and other federal entities. We can look at that one. Maximize that 5 times our block grant. And this could be low-income housing tax credits, new market tax credits, and all those financing deals that's needed. So we can take these and run and create these to support some of the leverage fundings that are needed for the various programs we would create, and be able then to have a management team, a management entity then to help execute the various programs. We can also include Navajo Nation as funding. So in the end, this TDHE would really absorb all housing and the related infrastructure under one umbrella, if you will, and have one point of entry for all housing programs for our people, and fit them in the various categories of need and housing. So we would need a very robust, and I'll say robust, technology to help identify and consolidate all the intakes so that we know all the applicants on the waiting list. Right now we are fragmented in Navajo Nation because of the wind system. We have a land reclamation management system. I think it's really because we need to be more efficient in all that we do, efficient and effective, because of this federal constrained environment. And then to be more timely in the delivery of the homes. So in the end, these are going to be the internal management system improvements that we can talk about that this entity needs to have. And some of the things that we are already pursuing under NHA, we certainly will share that's more in-depth dialogue. Nonetheless, though, that really is the crux of and the parameters in which we're seeing that really necessitates us as a nation to look at consolidating all the programs and no more keep being fragmented as we are now. And so that is our plan. That had been our plan, but there was always this TDHE issue. So this is our opportunity to talk about this because the time here, people, is 2013. There's going to be some significant reductions in all that we do for all programs, but as it pertains to housing, we now need to prepare for that. It's only a year away. And so I think it's opportune to look at this type of concept going forward. Whether it be NHA, whether it be, what the other matter is, because we're going to get into business unit, because we need to look at revenue generation, revenue generating, we need to look at economic development initiatives at the same look at a housing corporation of sorts, so that we can operate both a for-profit arm and then a nonprofit arm, making sure that we don't commingle with the dollars, and that we can do with sophisticated technology, making sure we track that. So that is another thought, is having a corporation where we then have a board of directors that have the acumen to really sustain and make these economic development initiatives viable and sustainable over the long term. So that, in a nutshell, is what we're looking at in terms of the TDHE. And it's something I think we've not really had dialogue with the Navajo Nation counterparts. I think that this gives us that opportunity finally to have a conversation, and a very serious one at that. So, Madam Chair, subcommittee members, this is really, I can put this in better, prettier format at the next meeting, but this is just the concept as we speak now. Thank you.
사실 concept it's I need AD want to discuss with them, so that's why let's put everything on the table. Otherwise, we all know where we're coming from, what our thoughts are. And we can bring it all together, or take it apart, or something. Mr. Mitchell, you can.
Detail and all that. But our main task here, TDHE. We're overseas, where does it belong? The way. The way it is right now, Navajo Nation. NHA. That's the way it is right now. That's it. Nowhere does it say community development chapters to provide their needs. So ever since I became a director, ever since I became part of the Navajo Nation, I always said, housing is a dream, everybody's dream. To put our application, our wish list, we tried that a few times, but it didn't really go anywhere. So I think I'll set up the way I see this TDHE. We get small amount. And then with the housing discretionary, it's millions. We're talking about. We can do it half of our housing need out there. So on this case, the process, we need to study the process of all the way from start to finish. Where does it go? To finally get into the plan, to get one person into that plan, patient connection. So the way I see is, Navajo Nation still up here, because they're the one that gets the money. Maybe right here. Right here. The way, just doing a comparison. The way NECA is set up, management agreement. Just an idea out there. Maybe we should just have a management agreement with NHA. Because NHA already has the infrastructure. They have the infrastructure in place. meaning finance. That they already have the personnel in place. I doubt it. So they have that infrastructure. But quacky, hey, yeah, we need to be back in the driver's seat. Navajo Nation as a whole. Because one day, because others make decisions in here of who should be on the list and the housing plan. We get the money. It goes here. We have no say after that. So, we still need to have that string attached to that money. Say this is how you're going to develop. This is the needs. Issuing that housing need assessment will come into play. So somehow we still need to have our input from community development chapters and other entities rather than the FDI. Based on that, develop a plan for everybody's participation. That's one thing that I see as a recommendation. The other recommendation is that we all become a sub-recipient. Navajo Nation, NHA, veterans, and Haitian. Then the question is, who's going to monitor? Who's going to make sure that everything is spent the way it's supposed to be spent? So it comes back to Mr. John, the office. Here, as a Navajo Nation, we're charged, based on the plan of operation, we're charged with that monitoring. Mr. John, how come you're not monitoring? So we need to either change the policies, change the law. If we're going to have all these recipients, who's going to oversee the monitoring and all that aid? So that always been my comment when it comes to TDHE. So a lot of times I don't have the answer. It's probably there, but not knowing, not being in the loop. Navajo Nation being in the loop. So needs to be back into control of developing that plan. The one thing is just go into the management agreement because it makes sure it still has the infrastructure. Let's say that Navajo Nation comes to TDHE. That is the capacity at the controller's office. Is it there? They oversee 500 million. Adding another 100 million. Are they maxed out on capacity? That's another thing that question needs to be asked. Out of the approval process, the approval process from start to finish, Navajo Nation, then NHA, that should probably determine, where best to put it. Also, management agreement, ADA, we can say, we'll give you the admin fee. This is going to be your admin fee. This is going to be your admin see a certain percentage. I know that the other percentage, you build houses, something like that. You build houses and up there, it's level 1A, yeah? Oh, cop. All means, I don't know, Mr. Johnson, might have another. I think later in the year there was 4 recommendations that were provided.
All right. I will present my thoughts. We already have a grants management office. NHA has a grants management office. My thought is to take that part off and leave that there. And this will be overseen by a commission. I don't know, I guess I need to research the difference between a commission and a board. About that is resource and development. I assume Navajo Nation does it. In here, it should not become a part of the Navajo Nation system. I don't see this functioning at all within our financial system. Not with the red tape we have, SAS process, everything. It doesn't work. It needs to stay independent. So, I think we just need to really beef up this part right here. Maybe it's not going to be called grants management. Maybe it'll be some different name. But I believe we already have a mechanism set up. And maybe the financial department, I know they use NHA's financial and monitoring. That's all it needs, I think, in here. A lot of monitoring. It doesn't need construction. Hey, for the law, all of the housing providers, which are under in this case, shift. All the housing programs. All of them. Independent of the Navajo Nation government. Or not government, but of the Navajo Nation system. Our famous SAS process. Very simple. That's my thoughts.
Council, Resource and Development, Oversight Committee, Board or Commission. Just for this fund. Now, HA, ASAP before, it'll come out later. Okay, I know this. So this is just specifically for these funds. TDHE, though, all the other funds that, housing funds are different. Okay, I'll answer this case. Government Associate?
Well. I look at what do we need? We have a problem that we're trying to resolve, and that is housing for as many Navajo people as possible. And then there's different groups of Navajo people: low income, middle income, high income. I think it doesn't matter whether you're high income or not, you should be welcome back to Navajo Nation. I don't mind a Fet's Place where there's golf course and all that, and where people like Patterson Joe can live, because he's too used to the golf course. I hope I'm right, Patterson. So it's kind of doing away with that discrimination and bringing everybody in. It's the wholesomeness of the society that we want to bring back. The other thing too is, when we were dealing with, say, good construction, we were trying to look for how do we keep quality teacher home. It don't matter what color their skin is. And so if we have good white people, Caucasian, that are teachers and they're good teachers, how do we keep them? And they need housing. And so that's what they ask for. Again, these IHS doctors, there are some good, loving IHS doctors out there that care about Navajo. But then, we have a problem for housing. Then I remember at Crown Point, when we started the library thing, we brought in a good librarian. She couldn't find housing. And so we wanted to keep her. And so the sub-recipient thing is kind of going away now as we're talking about this, and I appreciate the discussion. I think one of the things we could look at, I'm beginning to think now, is a Section 17 housing company. And the reason why is when you form that Section 17 here, and my thoughts were that we would do away with Navajo housing as it is today. And to me, it has not worked. And I say that with due respect, because the whole housing problem has not been resolved, and people are demanding. So you draw two. It comes to private and public housing effort. That's how I'm kind of looking at it now. Here, the private one, you have high-income Navajo people that are not eligible for these federal housing assistance and other housing assistance, but they still want housing. And how do we build them housing? So, well-off Navajo people and even non-Indians that help Navajo Nation come in here. So, the private housing part. The public housing, then to a home ownership. And then rentals that you have for the public housing. then here, we section this off into students and others. And how do we develop for them? So under section 17, that we could actually have public officials in the form of maybe the private sector, and it would be run by a general manager, one person to hold responsible. And then the TDHE would come back to the nation and then doing it like this. And then this section 17 then deals with chapters, certified chapters that want to maybe design something. They would become sub-recipients, and then the well-off ones, and then the schools. If they want to, I noticed that they're building housing for schools, school housing at Crown Point. So, by designating a private and public thing, we would make this entity eligible to receive public and private dollars, even from state schools, and work with them to build state schools. And all the utilities then are developed, are not then, developed in such a way that the state owns this power line, the tribe owns this power line, but it's all under one. And we give them the tools. And I agree that when I say Navajo Nation entity, that I think by law, by Navajo Nation law, we could say that it keeps its independent status, semi-quasi-independent status. And so that, and I agree, there should be no SAS, so that we by law, we say that, we authorize them to internally work the housing thing. And then so an individual comes in, and if it's a rich Navajo, there are opportunities that will be developed over here, along with dollars that it receives, and even leveraging other dollars that, creating relationship with friends. This is what the Resource Committee is also working on, is some of the economic development is one day creating our own bank. And you could tie this into financing for the others. And if the other individual comes in, public housing, because you have Nahasda money, it's getting Nahasda money and non-Nahasda money. And if there are regulations that are in the way, then you have the private dollars to give in a public one. That, a Navajo elder wants a hokan. Wants a simple hokan, that's all it wants. And then so, and even a Navajo elder coming in, if there's no other public program that allows for hogans, and all the elders saying, I just want a hogan, and it costs us 17 grand. So why not? Under the private housing thing, we would subsidize building hogans for elders. And so, and then the other thing too is, this could create a relationship with, and that's what I'm thinking, and actually these are not my thoughts, these are your thoughts in a way, because I'm getting some ideas from you guys. These companies that we could merge with, because of the private nature, the private side of it, will allow merger with big companies out there, Weyerhaeuser, those that make windows. And we would make direct deals with them to bring us at a low cost certain things. And even prefab a HOCA program to where we could just pretty much build it in one day and take it out there on a logo and set it up with a crane. That's it, it's done. And then no more housing problems. It's all pre-wired, it's all insulated, and all of that, and you bolt it together. And so then, if an elder wants, if we can't find public housing, AD budget, work like at universities. That's what I'm thinking that. Today much of our scholarship money goes
into housing, rental. And, somehow we need to promise students that when you go to school, the nation will begin to help you with home ownership. And so when you leave school, the scholarship dollars that you get, you would own a home by the time you come out. And I think, and you could only because Section 17 is a federal enactment, then I think you can play a lot with it on which way to go. And that's what I'm thinking. The way that the Navajo Housing Authority was born is that it doesn't allow any private. It only allows the public, low income, addressing low income. But our housing needs is everywhere. And I think this is also to address what's coming out of the census data, that we have Navajos migrating off. And the census, the population rate, population growth in northwest New Mexico and Arizona too, that our population went down. But the rate of birth is the same. We have a high birth rate. So where are all the Navajos going? They're going to the municipality areas. And because families are saying that, because of the high unemployment, the lack of certain infrastructure and other things, I would rather take my family to a municipal area. And I think that's what's going on. And so this would try to address to bring these people home. And it also, what I'm thinking is the brain drain. All these high-income people, Navajos, why can't we have them live among us? And I remember when I was running, an engineer came over to me from Whitehorse and said, I don't want anything, I just want to help. I'm doing good in my job, I have retirement, I just want to come home to help. How can I help? But there's no housing for this rich off Navajo. But he's a Navajo. He wants to come home and then, let him come and volunteer their time and their expertise. But there's a housing here, their clans are here, their families are here, and then they have the means to travel to their other house or here, that we could bring them back. And that's what I'm looking at, man, in terms of a wholesome family development. And I think, you get certain benefits by federal enactment. And, I think it'll work along those lines in my mind. And, there are many issues. But that's what I'm thinking, Shanta. I don't thank you for the opportunity.
Mr. Mitchell and then Ms. Yasi.
Let's get to reality here. I think the reality is that we all lack planning. Planning is the one that's going to make things happen out there. Where's the land? Where's the infrastructure? Where's the environmental assessments? Those are what's going to make housing happen out there. If you don't have planning, nothing's going to happen. Nothing is going to happen. Now, a lot of what you're talking about is how to do housing industry. But I didn't hear anybody talking about the planning. This is how we're going to do planning. This is how we're going to set aside land. Somebody mentioned earlier housing zones. Maybe that's where we need to start. Housing zones. And I think that in order to do that, I think a lot of the money that's coming from NHA, from the housing, IHBG, we really need to focus in on where do we have enough infrastructure out there? Where are we going to get the water? Is the water, does that water have the capacity for new housing construction? Do we have the electrical capacity? Believe it or not, if you listen to NTUA, there's a lot of communities out there that are maximizing their electrical capacity right now. And they're building up their subdivisions, their substations to accompany new development. So that's something that I think we really need to look at. If any development's going to happen, I think we really need to start looking at step back and start looking at the planning. Where do we start? There's a lot of housing programs out there, yes. And that's why earlier I mentioned that maybe we need to look at what some of the issues are. The issues are maybe that they're not ready. There's land that are not set aside, land that are set aside that are not suitable for development, land that are set aside that do not have floodplain delineations, land that are not conducive to community development, and that's why we have a lot of people that are opposing subdivisions right now because of the spin-offs that are coming with it, the social issues, the domestic problems, the gang problems, drug problems, and so forth. So it's a lot bigger picture than what we anticipated. I think that's where we need to look at and say, okay, how do we make this housing work? So, we all agree that the Navajo Nation, the funding comes to the Navajo Nation. We all agree that. At least that's one part we agree to start with. Okay? This is where, somewhere along the line, from that point on, I think that's where we need to start saying, okay, how do we put this whole scenario together? So, we're talking about the TDHE. What is the role of the TDHE? Is it really just to distribute funds? Is its role to monitor funds, the programs, or is its role to develop policies and regulations? What is the role of TDHE? That's something I think we really need to emphasize. What is the role? Is it just to distribute the money and rate the proposals and so forth? Or to develop regulations? Or monitor? I think that's where we need to define the role of the TDHE. Okay, now, with that said, I think what we need to do is develop a planning section. The Navajo Nation, as big as it is, does not have a planning department. They do not have a planning department. Go to the city of Gallup, they have a whole slew of staff in their planning department. Go to the state of New Mexico, state of Arizona, they have a whole slew of planners. They have a planning department. The Navajo Nation does not have a planning department. That's one. That's where you do all your assessments, all your studies, all your master planning, and so forth. Now, the other thing I hear in the presentation is that, this is good concept on the other side. But in some cases, some programs are so self-contained. They try to do everything from step 1 to step 10. That's why people tend to not to talk to one another. That's where the communication gap is. Because they don't want to work with the other people, so they self-contain anywhere from land to final inspection. And I think that's where some of the issues are coming in and so forth. So, planning is one. The other one is capacity building. Capacity building. There's a lot that was presented today, but how many people know about that? How many people know about engineering? How many people know about construction management? How many people know about alternative financing, home ownership financing? How many people actually know? We need to build that capacity. That's where your technical assistance and capacity building comes in. Do we all know about mortgaging? Does our people know about mortgaging? Does the veterans know about mortgaging? Who's there to teach them? The other one is policy development. How we're going to monitor that, how we're going to regulate that. Okay, everybody has their own, we just go by federal regulations now. But as Navajo Nation, we need to have our own code. We need to have our own standards. We don't even have a land use standards that we go by. What are the land use standards? And develop our code. I think that's where we need to step back. Yeah, it may take a little longer than we anticipate, but you know, to do things right, I think we need to put all these foundation, the framework in place. Otherwise, we're jumping into a frying pan again. So, and then of course, you have your implementation. I think there's a lot of housing providers out there already. We just need to provide them the technical assistance, provide them with the policies, and provide them with the plan and say, here it is. There's all these housing providers that are out there. And the reason why I think because they kind of like backed off a little bit is because of the study, the OIG report that was put out and everything else. So all of this, I think that as a role, first of all, we need to define the role of the TDHE. Is it just to distribute the grants, to monitor, or something else, to regulate, or something else? So quacky. But I do agree that this needs to be, I don't know if that's the right word, quasi. Is there such a word as quasi-independent? I don't know. Maybe somebody does. What does it mean? Does it mean that halfway house, I'd say? Anyway, but it needs to be kind of independent. Now, when you do this, the implementation portion, that's for new development. It might be for new development. Now, the other one is the, we have a NHA. I thought the NHA, there are people already, in case somebody mentioned that they already have the management and the process in place. That's true. So, maybe right here. The reason why I put management on there is they're charged with maintaining and operating the 1938 housing programs. And that's what their main role should be. Otherwise, they should also be sub-recipients like everybody else. But their role here would be to operate and maintain the 1937 housing stock. Okay. So maybe this is something that we should be looking at. And here's the subrecipient. But I think we need to develop this foundation, to get the planning in place, to get our TA and training in place, to build our capacity, then to get the policies and the codes and the regulations from that group, internally, and then do to implementation. That's my concept based on the study. This study doesn't really elaborate on that. It just gives you a real general concept. There's actually three recommendations that were made here. Four. One is to leave it as is. What are the pros and cons? Two is to make a division of community development, and we heard the other presentation. Three is to create a new entity also. And then 4 is a management consultant. Those are the 4 options. I think that either option we go with, I think one of the main things is to get these back in place. That way, we don't get too self-contained. One program doesn't get too self-contained in certain areas. So, this is my conceptual thought on the TDHE.
Ms. Yazzie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate all the discussion and all the perspectives. I think fundamentally, though, and while this is great, as I sit as the CEO right now of Navajo Housing Authority in its present form, there has to be an understanding of Nahasta and how Congress structured the law and how Congress allocates those funds and how it has structured an oversight agency, HUD, to monitor this. So there are some constraints on them, and every federal dollar always comes with strings. It's really understanding that those constraints, and while I appreciate and I applaud all the ideas here, I think there's opportunity to amalgamate all of the ideas here within the confines, however, we still need to keep that in mind, of Nahasta. There's the tribal TDHE, the role and responsibility, is actually defined by law. And to the extent that we can seek these grant funds, yes, that's applicable, we need to be able to look at that. I think what we're talking about is a bigger picture beyond the TDHE, and I think both subcommittee member Sosi and I have kind of alluded to that, and that is looking at this other entity, which is a bigger umbrella outside of the realm of Nahasta-funded activity, because there's eligible activities, there's eligible applicants, there's program requirements, a lot of other federal law that kicks into play with these dollars, as opposed to tribal dollars. These assembly laws don't apply to tribal dollars. So it have to be something outside the Navajo Nation, not outside, but not within the Navajo Nation governmental structure. It would have to be this quasi-type independent. Knowing, however, that there are these dollars that come into play. Now, maybe in education at the next meeting on what we can do with TDHE, we can leverage private dollars, but that has certain restrictions, as opposed to Section 17 that would have no restrictions. We can categorize Nahasta funded versus non-Nahasta funded type of activities. So, but I think it's getting that education too. And while I applaud the fundamentals of our tribal government lacking basic planning, and that really was the approach that NHA was coming back to, was to fund chapters to get back to planning, and have the chapters really have an accountability of their membership, because they serve the members that elected the delegates as well as the chapter officials. They would then, this would be from the grassroots level of development, not only housing, but other type of zoning, I guess, for the respective chapters and their land use plans. It really is empowering them back at the local level to tell our nation and the people that manage these funds what is it that they're needing. But each of these funds, though, really, and I guess it's an education, Madam Chair, to say, what are those constraints? And let's recognize those constraints, and then let's look at how then we can fashion this. Maybe we're constrained to how we create this. But there's that opportunity, though, to look at private dollars, but not to the extent that the NHA is set up right now. NHA was like a Navajo Housing Corporation. That'd be something similar to the Section 17, I think, that was being proposed. That would have, it would maximize and be able to joint venture with entities outright. You're able then to just be a corporation to do at will with other financing schemes to bring in those dollars. So I liked everything that was brought up here. It triggered other thoughts in my mind. Maybe we can come back with some new thoughts, I guess, with respect to this. But Madam Chair, what I would like to ask is, because this is Nahasta and it's a statute, and it does have restrictions that we really need to be mindful of. And I'd like to give that overview too, so that we know what the eligible activities are. Rehash of essentials. NAHASDA essentials, I guess is what I'm getting back to. Is what are those fundamental mechanisms of NAHASDA, and what are those constraints that are imposed by it. And the Navajo Nation is in control. This is not independent of the Navajo Nation. The Navajo Nation, as a tribal government, is the beneficiary of these funds. So they will have the ultimate execution and approval of these monies. But it's going back to the grassroots level and development of those needs. So, Madam Chair, I just want to offer that. I appreciate the discussion. I think this is really going to be very beneficial for everyone.
Great. Thank you. I think I'm going to ask staff to call HUD from Denver office to either come up here as soon as possible to give us the information directly from them, or we go up there as a committee and spend a couple of days if necessary to get all of the information. Delegate Sosi and I do ayuhi do sapoto or ben kim on ne dashle. Daho onzen doshle. Sheo yoshli. I'll admit that. I get into full scoop and say, that's just how I am. So I'd rather hear from the horse's mouth. HUD, Denver office. Plans. We now know what our thoughts are, where we think is going to fit best. But I didn't hear from either Division of Community Development or NHA. Where in the government would TDHE fit? I don't say that's on. These are needed. ADDA, that's what we heard. So, Washington, Navajo Nation government, I promised Indian Housing Council a couple of weeks ago that the Navajo Nation will be responsible. I promised them, and I intend to fulfill that promise. Yes, we are currently just a rubber stamp. And that is why we are in the position we were in. Office of the Auditor Inspector gave us a letter saying that. Navajo Nation government, this is your money, but you're not acting responsible. Likewise with other Indian tribes. They said that to us. Delegate Sosina right in our face. You guys are irresponsible. And we said, we're no longer going to be that way. We're going to be responsible, maybe. So that's where this is all going to go. Within the government system. Our division, the program, I think Delegate Associates, I'm hearing that. And I think our colleagues feel the same way. Because we just think it's too much red tape. We just need to figure a way where will it be. So this is a good discussion. We can bring it all together and make it work the best for the nation, the people. So the first plan would be to meet with HUD. Second plan, we're now at plan of action. Mr. John?
Madam Chair, I just wanted to maybe also indicate, I don't know what somebody asked about the real reason the transfer from Southwest office to the Denver office or the Northern Plains office. Perhaps if we could hear also from the Southwest office to see what the issue was.
Committee members. Delegate Sosi?
Madam Chair, I think we do need to hear from a TDHE expert, or housing expert on TDHE, to see what are the constraints, how far can we go. make use of some federal assistance in terms of advice. Maybe somebody could tell us how other housing programs are running by other Indian tribes, whether they're similar or not, and maybe some good thoughts that they have. I think making use of that, I think will go a long ways. The other thing too is when you're redesigning a program, you also have to look at the downside of the past. Why is it not working? And so that we could identify that as we're drafting a new one. In the end, one of the very initial determination that I think we need to make before we start is, should this placement be to a quote-unquote Navajo division that would take away the independence for a housing entity in its structure under Navajo Nation program? Or should it be quasi-independent? Or should it be independent? I think some of us are leaning towards quasi-independence for a housing entity that will have TDHE. Yes, we are worried about the bureaucracy structure of Navajo Nation. And I think the way Mr. John was drawing it is the way until he said so what it should be. That's actually a Navajo Nation division structure. The land placed under Navajo Nation division control because you're doing management planning, all that stuff. But the main thing though is how do we determine right off the bat the independence of this entity. And I think if we, after hearing this expert and looking at the insurance, we all agree towards a positive independence. So almost immediately start getting into the fashion. I think, at the next meeting too, Madam Chair, that I'd like to hear from NHA the unpleasant stories. Why do you think it's not working? An honest self-assessment. Why, the type of board structure that you have, ended up with independent inspector looking at you. Why was there no control so that when we're designing a quasi-independent body, that we provide for some type of control to prevent that again, so that it doesn't happen again, things like that. And then I think, Madam Chair, then when we look at these things, if it's quasi-independent, so the new law would specifically spell out on the NHA or the SAS thing that the idea is not to do that. And things like that I think we could work on as we move forward. Thank you.
Okay, the other thing, I think Delegate Sosi and I, maybe other members of the Resources and Development Committee, could ask to meet with Roger Boyd, ask for his guidance on sending us to the best TDHE in the nation and the worst and the medium. We'll look at all three of them, or several of them. Then we'll see what works, why it works, and then bring that back and share it with you. I don't know if you all want to come with us. The travel better than the edition. But we can go as a committee. But I just feel like, I guess it doesn't matter. We can go as a committee or bring him here for the committee. See which way I prefer them coming here. That way we don't expend any funds, but we'll see what works. Ms. Halsey?
Thanks, Madam Chair. To the question of HUD, I do agree, and that's fine to have the regulators come here. And in fact, there's an opportunity the week of December 12th where HUD Denver will be on site back here at Navajo. So we will also extend an invitation to Roger Boyd as well. I will also ask him not only to look at the Nahasa program, what are some program constraints as it pertains to TDHE functions. but also to give us their perspectives on pros and cons of tribal governments that took the TDHE in-house and how that fared and how they've been successful. So Mr. Boyd will extend that too, because I had heard too from them that that had not been successful for most of the tribes, but you'll hear from the HUD agency officials, so that would be very opportune. With regard to the quasi-independence, that really would be the notion that we would stand from NHA, and that's how I think it's kind of structured, simply because the monies do get allocated to the tribal government as a beneficiary, so there's a dependence on the Navajo Nation of a process that has been triaged to where we have a bona fide housing plan to deliver services. Self-assessment I certainly will do, and I'm here 4 years now into this position. I made those assessments when I first came on, so it's just a matter of updating some of that and some of the things that didn't work. One of the first things we've done when I got into office was develop a code of ethics and conduct policy that was lacking by NHA since NHA was there. And so all those elements we can enumerate and then present to the subcommittee so you can understand the history of NHA and then to where this administration then took over. Madam Chair.
Mr. John?
Madam Chair, just wanted to maybe ask some clarification to Ms. Yazzie. Since this is an TDHE effort and it's really related to the IHEG and its efforts, what's the possibility of maybe setting aside a certain amount of funds for the subcommittee's use for travel and for other things that are associated with the task here?
Ms. Yazzie?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the question. Subcommittee member Chavez. It is an eligible activity, I would think. I just need to, because of the protocols right now, just setting that aside, we certainly can do that, and I can present that to my Board of Commissioners, and we can certainly modify our budget to fit that. I reserve that for board approval. Some of the things, protocols that I'm currently subjected to, Madam Chair.
Mr. Mitchell?
2000, thank you again. 2002, yeah, there was a 3-branch and also I remember they set up a committee just similar to ours and trying to put a housing plan together. During that time, I remember they set aside some housing money. So I guess see if, I keep asking for that plan. How's that? There's probably a housing plan that's out there that was put together with this TDHE money. Oh, 2002, yeah, under Council McGee.
John Bond and
So,
any other questions or comments? Delegate Sosi?
Well, we're going to a murky land. And so, but I welcome the challenge. I think, to me, it's performance. And we need to design something that will perform, that will address the housing needs. And in a way, though, dollars that come in is sometimes because of the eligibility requirements. The other thing too, Madam Chair, I think is, I think Arvin, he's our census expert. And so there are some interesting conclusions coming forth from these census counts that were done. And one of them is that the family structure is such that more and more it's being managed by a single female. And it's just not limited to Indians, it's also to like blacks, Hispanics, and others. And then there's a great shift that's happening. And I think when you do housing and other things, you kind of have to look at those trends too. How do we structure it so that, and then we're looking at, the resource community is looking at even economic development, houses being built near to businesses that they will run. And so that a family or somebody wants to start a welding shop, they live near their business. I looked at the American society, and for good or for worse, the way they've designed everything is, I think they've shied away from scattered housing. Scattered housing is expensive. And that's why all these cities were born, to concentrate and make efficient use of the dollars to provide community developments. And so I know many of our people still want to stretch their leg and yawn at their pleasure and not be seen by their neighbor 2 miles away. We may have to conclude that those days are over. And also, I looked at the facts that whenever it rains or snows, you see these families parking by the pavement, and having to walk home. And then we also have to look at the little kids that are growing up, and how do we provide for housing where, they're near the transportation system, or their bus or whatever. So I think as we do the TDHE, to me, is who's going to get the dollar, the federal dollars. And I think if we designate a certain entity that along with that allows us to change maybe the structure and use that opportunity. So I appreciate NHA's effort to go forward and help us, Madam Chair. This is off to a good start. Yeah. Thank you.
Mr. Mitchell?
One thing that we need to in that census, I'd say it came to mind. One important question is multi-race and single race. So that's how we get our. So Denver, but they need if we want to meet in Denver, census offices in Denver too. Maybe they can start really teaching us how to use these data. Just a recommendation, because that's a very important question. Which one do you use, multi-race or single race? So we're getting into a lot of these multi-race now for Navajo, Hopi, Zuni, all that. Or do we use our single race, Navajo alone? So we probably need to do a study on which route we need to take.
Ms. Yazzie?
Madam Chair, to the question from Mr. Mitchell. Right now, the formula funding aspect of NAHASTA is going to undergo another negotiated rulemaking, and that will take place the summer of next year, and we would invite, I think, even oversight to be knowledgeable of that, the discussion. But right now, in appropriations, it had always been, there's a safe language, fortunately, that in formula proceedings that we take the greater of either the single race or the multi-race election of a tribe. And thus far for Navajo, we have been electing for the single race because that was the greater of the two. Because as a governmental nation, we've always used single race, the census data. But an analysis of the multi-race may prove to be bigger, I don't know, but we can certainly look at that. Those calculations, we have HUD describe and present and explain that process as well, Madam Chair.
No. Hazanya, Denver Godi Kaila, Asa had census office. There's an appointment at the field. Mr. Boyd on the 12th. Ms. Yazzie?
I so apologize, I'm remiss. November 28th is when we're traveling to HUD. Is that opportune for the members?
Oh,
November 28th, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. This is a work session with the housing plan, all the other issues that we have. But we certainly can make room, I would imagine. Denver, we're flying to Denver, November 28th. For 3 days, is that opportune? The third day, Wednesday, is when we're going to be with all the federal programs there too at HUD. And then that's also Native Heritage Month. They're going to have a celebration that day. That may be opportune that Wednesday. The
30
30th.
and 28th. Is that a Monday or Tuesday?
Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday.
Tuesday with the Haidan agenda. Do you recall, Martha? What was urgent? What is urgent?
The 30th is RDC meeting with
BNF. Yeah.
We can schedule something separately.
Yeah. Give us an itinerary or agenda of what is on the books. Depoited here jadid. Bandits and unhidden healer. Bandits and she bands and ye. Dear bandits and the on high nick. She Jovinit out of the nobilina. Star you did not best your the same machine. Oh, a bias and yadas and you know. Cutting he needs on it. Hit our eager oided after Behans and Dolly. To bear with the Yaka Dolly, that's Anya until Billy got the young, his bears and Dolly. No transportation, you don't put I say your Behans and Dolly, so the cat had a car. And he's I don't know, we're going to be responsible. Navajo Nation Council is going to be responsible. So we will look at the agenda. We will share that information with the committee. Certainly, the vice can run the meeting if there are real urgent matters on the 29th. The 30th, it's hard to plan a joint meeting with BNF. Besides those learning experience, Mr. Mitchell?
Back to the 30th. Yeah.
Oh.
The 30th, yeah. I saw an email coming from Mr. Martinez. There was a meeting that was being planned by Upper Fruitland on the 30th. So I don't know if Mr. Bates is aware of the November 30th.
Martha?
Joe.
We'll see how that works, but I think this is important. Any others? I don't know, but by the time we gather all of our information,
Madam Chair, we could kind of like to sit in a circle, maybe NHA board.
I think so.
They have the longest board table that I'm aware of.
Biga. Okay, Ms. Yazzie?
Are we looking at December for the next meeting?
Yes, we are.
I'm in the office the 19th.
December 19th? December 19th. Sounds like a good date. Is that a Monday?
It's a Monday.
Monday works best for us. Tuesday we have committee meetings. Monday, Biga. Oh. Claude, I did this. Ms. Yazzie. Chapter planning money that should be done.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Those letters I instructed staff to issue the end of October. I think there was some delay with questions now being vetted by some of the chapters, making sure that we have a complete and concise information packet to the council delegates. And what this will be is a letter of award to the council delegate of representation. So you had a council delegate representing 6 chapters. It will go to that council delegate representing those 6 chapters for these planning dollars. And and it will identify all the do's and don'ts with these dollars eligible. And NHA, however, will assist in the procurement if that's what's needed. But it's simply going to be at the direction of the council delegate in concert with their consultations with the chapters for planning needs. So that's how we're going to send this. But we're vetting out some of the questions beforehand, making sure it's all that we can include in that letter. And I would expect that to go out no later than next week, if not this Friday. Today's Monday, yeah.
Mr. Mitchell, then Mr. Sosa, Delegate Sosa.
Thank you. Craigie, when the discussion of the FY11 housing plan during that time, we requested from community development that, rather than having all these chapters have different plan, working with ASU just to get a model plan. Like some of these chapters are ready for a comprehensive master plan. How do you develop a master plan? The next one is, how do you update your land use plan that was approved last year, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago? Let's build some parameters for those that way. Everybody's going to have a different plan and all that. They need that. I still like to make that request. On the ASU, they sent a proposal on how to do an outline plan to update your land use plan, to do a master plan, comprehensive plan.
So last response, the ABS on page, what's next for planning in Nicola? Go ahead.
Just we need to chapter 8 nuclear, to say that we need to do this for planning. How do we spend our money wisely rather than what happened to the land you needed to live 5 years from now?
Ms. Yasi?
Thank you, Madam Chair. We're going to leave it to the area of delegation. That will be the council delegate and the respective chapters. And if the Navajo Nation Community Development is going to offer that to them, that's going to be a local dialogue with just you all the entities. All we're going to do is fund whatever you will agree to do. Madam Chair.
Yeah. Delegate Sosa?
I would encourage NHA to look at the model or the region. It sounds like because you're going to work with delegates that this is like that regional council thing that Delegate Witherspoon did, and also John Jimenez. Personally, I kind of prefer the Witherspoon model. I think you should look at that and see if we should do this regional thing for all delegates. So because this is a planning money, and so that then each delegate will work with their respective chapters under a regional planning thing. And then maybe even craft a generic thing that we could do, maybe based on the Witherspoon model. I would encourage you to look at those legislation, because before we do those money things, something that we could look at to try to do. So, thank you.
Committee members. I think that should be an option. The regionalization should be an option left to the chapters. I can tell you, as much as we work together and are already sort of regionalized, even without a plan of operation, I know my 3 chapters are very independent, don't want to be forced to something like that. So, is John Jono Convention. For a long time, the Alto chapter refused LGA certification. Washington central government, the policy it's not independent. No, so we have a meeting scheduled for December 19th. Motion to adjourn by Mr. John or Mr. Mitchell. Second by Ms. Yazzie. All in favor say aye. Unanimous. Thank you.